So Prototype is one of my favourite games, and the big draw of the game is the powers, like all the cool different powers you can have. So I was thinking, what if I played through the entire game without using any of them? And I know what you're thinking, wait, don't you have to use consuming to heal and to disguise, and you have to disguise, right? Well actually, here in the powers menu, I don't seem to see consuming or disguise. So anything that's on this menu, I can't use, and anything that's not, I can. Pretty simple. So the things I can't use include claws, Hammerfist, Musclemass, Whipfist, blade, shield, armor, thermal vision, and infected vision. As an added bonus, I'm not going to use Devastators either, because they're pretty powerful, and I feel like they constitute as powers, certainly offensive powers, whereas consuming and disguise are utility powers. So is vision, but vision doesn't matter. So we start the game on a cutscene that still looks fantastic today. And then we get right into the tutorial, which as you can imagine, poses an immediate problem. The game's like, yo, why don't you test out all these powers here in this flash forward before you actually use them later on in the game. Prototype 2 has the same problem with egregious tutorials, and unfortunately I can't get rid of the claws as soon as they're equipped, but I can pick up a gun and start shooting. We kill the soldiers easily, but then we switch to Hammerfist because the tanks are coming, so then we have to start using the rocket launcher, and then the game switches us to the blade, and I instantly fail the challenge and have to restart the checkpoint. So yes, if I mess up, that's what I'm going to do, I'm going to restart the checkpoint. Of course, the only reason I made this mistake is because I was forced to have the blade out, so it's not really something I'm going to have to worry about most of the time. Unfortunately, the tutorial doesn't have a checkpoint, so I go back to the beginning of the game, and this time I learn the power of throwing, which is going to be key in this playthrough. I am then forced to use the Devastator, but it doesn't really count because it's a tutorial. Also doesn't count because it was a cutscene, and also it's not actually a power. So even if I actually use the Devastator, I'm not even losing the challenge, but I wouldn't count this regardless anyway. We go back in time to when we wake up in the hospital, which means we don't have any powers yet. Not the ones we have to worry about anyway. So I met our sister, found out about our ex-girlfriend, and then met Elizabeth Green. We kill and consume the hunter she sent after us, giving us our first power. And yes, I know that he kills people in the cutscene where he gets the claws. That's not real. That's a cutscene, that's not me doing that. I can't avoid it. You can't kill all the soldiers because they infinitely respawn, and you can't consume the hunter somewhere else because you always get teleported to the middle right next to the soldiers anyway. This will be the last time something like this happens at least. So obviously you're supposed to beat these hunters with the claws, but I can't do that. They send so many of these fucking things after you. What is this? I mean, you can barely get hits in when you have the claws, never mind now. Even so, after a lot of punching, throwing and shooting, we managed to take them down. The game finally acknowledges that there are too fucking many of them and decides to make you destroy the facility. We overcome our first challenge pretty handily, and then we go on to the next mission. The game's still starting up, so we're just told to infiltrate a facility, which is pretty easy. Oh, for fuck's sake. Which is pretty easy, and then we're going to learn how to drive tanks, which is probably going to be the most useful skill that we use in this run. But being on the receiving end of one of these is a different matter entirely. Without Hammerfist, they can be pretty tough to take down, but this early on in the game it's pretty easy to just hijack one and then start using it against the others, or against the helicopters, which are also a problem. Almost every conflict in this game takes place near a street, so you can throw these cars at things pretty easily, although they're not the best against tanks. And there's always some sort of soldier around with an explosive you can use, so it's not too tough. I also dragged this guy along with me for ages just to throw him and fucking miss, so that was cool. In the next mission, helicopters start showing up everywhere, and regular guns do pretty much nothing to it. But there's this thing called a flip kick, and two of those take down pretty much every helicopter until we start getting to the end of the game, which is pretty useful because there aren't always throwables readily available. Throwing a person also does about as much as a flip kick anyway, so there's really no point in doing that. On the other hand, big objects usually destroy helicopters and objectives in one go. I start doing some side missions, most of which are pretty much the same. For example, some side quests make you destroy hives, which you have to use tanks or throwables to do anyway. The issue is, of course, is that you're supposed to be using your powers to take care of hunters and tanks and all that stuff. And I checked, it takes about 20 seconds to kill a hunter, whereas usually it'll be about 10 seconds. That's just with the claws though. Later in the game when you get the blade, you can kill one in like 2 seconds. And that's along with both tanks and helicopters. So yeah, I'm glad I'm not doing a melee only run. Speaking of melee only, our ex sells us out and we have to fight the first boss, cross. And for some reason, the first phase of the fight is the hardest because there's nothing around to heal myself with. You just have to keep flip kicking him until he loses enough health. Of course there's throwables too, but he can destroy them and there's only a certain amount of them. The second phase of the fight introduces the infected, which is good because I really needed to heal after all the times I ran into his shock baton. Shock baton? How the fuck do I say this? Anyway, the third phase is like super easy because the soldiers start coming with their weapons and I can just shoot cross with those to finish him off. And even though we won, he ends up ejecting us with a parasite, which makes us lose all our powers. Oh no. So to try and find a way to get rid of this parasite, we find this guy called Raglan, and then something destroy a bunch of tanks, and you may be wondering, why is he telling us this? This is not relevant to the challenge because you don't have any powers anyway. Well, you see, usually I do pretty bad at this because I'm not used to playing the game without my powers, but now I am used to it because I started the game like that. So this time, instead of having a lot of trouble, I still have a lot of trouble and die a bunch of times. In the background, I've been getting all these upgrades for health and for the tanks and this adrenaline surge which is supposed to help me, but it's not really. Not that it's that important, but I am making it clear that I am using upgrades for hand-to-hand combat and health and machine guns and tanks and everything that isn't powers. I dread to think what a can you beat without upgrading is like. But we managed to make it through that mission and
Did you ever consider how the parasite felt?
No, I did not give a shit what the parasite felt. What is this?
Yeah, I did. Once. Right before I killed it.
Okay, I won't lie. I love this game, but it is not scripted very well at all. Anyway, I go on to just barely beat this mission with the glass. Like, when the glass is like, has 1 HP. Like, I think it actually got destroyed, but like, I still won. Like, look how close this is. This is, whoa, my Jesus. I learned how to fly helicopters, even though it's not super useful because I can't use my Whipfist to grab onto them and hijack them. Or at least it won't be for a while. I go and get my powers back and what is this? Why? There's supposed to be this epic cutscene playing where I get my powers back and I'm in a fucking box. Oh my god, look at these shots. It makes the box look like a fucking badass. Look at this epic close-up on the box. Anyway, after we get out of the box, we instantly turn both our armor and blade off. This isn't the end of the shenanigans, by the way. Like, they're coming up right now. I spent all my points upgrading on, you know, jump this and whatever, right? I spent all my points. And then the game tells me that I have to buy a Devastator. Like, for what reason? You don't need this. Like, this isn't even in a cutscene. I mean, it's in the tutorial, but like, that doesn't count. Tutorials don't count. So of course I have to go do some side missions to buy this thing I'm never gonna use. Including one where this happens.
I'm going with my gut and having a look.
I am going to commit suicide.
Like, I was so confused. I just kind of stood there for like, I was like, why did that just happen? I don't even know because I didn't do anything. Or at least I thought that I hadn't done anything that would warrant a guy, you know, just deciding to end it all. But we're gonna have to take a break from the fun stuff because our sister gets captured. And then we have a gratuitously long chase sequence where I get ran over by a tank in a cutscene. What is going on? What is happening? And then guess what happens? That's right, the fucking guy I'm chasing gets stuck in a wall. I try absolutely everything I can to get him out. I try punching and kicking, I try uppercuts, I try charge attacks for the first time ever. I also try using the rocket launcher, but I have to fight through, apparently, every infected there is just to pick it up. Look at this. This is ridiculous. It takes me like 20 full seconds just to pick this up. It's right there. But yes, I do finally pick it up and it doesn't do anything. I still have to go back to the checkpoint. At least it's after the chase and not before it, because that would have been a nightmare. So the elite hunter gets away with our sister anyway. Somehow. And in the meantime, I do some more side missions and just look at this clip. I accidentally pick up the wrong person and then throw her and it hits the quest giver off screen. And then the second time, I'm so hasty that I just punch him in the face and kill him. At least I got him the third time. The mission it gives me is infiltration, which is when you go into a base and you're like, consume all the important people. Obviously I haven't been bringing it up because it hasn't been relevant until now, because it's totally relevant to the challenge, guys, trust me. So you can stealth kill and you can do this thing called Patsy where you just say, you know, the guy is, you know, the virus, and then they all shoot him for some reason without really thinking about it. It was the clip in the intro, you remember. So I Patsy this guy and I realized that the rocket launcher guys are shooting at him too. And just watch this second one. Like, what are they doing? And when we're down to 4 people, I patsy the guy with a rifle, and then this happens. Now look at this. This is a freeze frame. Now this is something to hang up on your wall. Anyway, at the end I just put them out of their misery. So then I get back to the main story and fall off this building, and then you have to do the reverse of what you just did. You have to chase it, and now you gotta get it to chase you. Who designed this part of the game, like seriously? And then after this is canonically where the intro happens, if you were wondering, which I'm sure you were. We consume the elite hunter and get infected vision, which is going to be a pretty big deal, and you're going to see why in a second. So you get infected vision, and then right after that, you get a mission where you have to use it. This is the only time infected vision matters at all, in any capacity. So what do? Well, of course I try and do it without using infected vision. I fail, and then just completely give up, of course. But once we actually use infected vision, you may notice something about the people who are infected. It's the people who are secluded and isolated. I'm sure there's a joke there. But yes, then I realize, oh, they're probably static. So I'll reload the checkpoint. Oh, it just took me right back to after I used infected vision. So I can't go back. So of course I gave up, went on my way, ended the recording, and then I overrided my previous save, which can I say was a fantastic idea. And then laying in bed that night, I was like, there was no reason to do that. There was no reason not to just retry and see if the guys on the outside were the infected ones. Because they obviously were, and they are. They're static, they're the same every time. I of course know this because I started the game over again. Yes, that's right, after recording 5 hours of gameplay doing this challenge, I decided to just restart it again because if I didn't, this would bother me until the end of time. Only took me 4 hours. That was with me skipping cutscenes and rushing, by the way. So no, nothing interesting happened. Other than this, of course. But yes, I got all the way back to where I was and started consuming these guys. Surprise, surprise, I did it first try. And that was with me not being sure if this last guy would be infected or not, because I already consumed the obvious guys. After finally getting infected vision out of the way, I could move on to the boss fight. We're going up against the frankly ruthless Supreme Hunter. Like Cross, the first phase was a lot of me just running around and finding something to throw at him, except this time I was being chased pretty closely. After being knocked around a few times, we move on to the second phase. Hunters and tendrils have been added in with the regular guys, but frankly I'm just glad to have something to heal with. The thing is, with my running and throwing strat, I really don't need to slow down and let them hit me. I don't know if the phases of this fight are tied to time or what, but I barely did any damage to him, and by that time the tanks had already shown up. I'm really glad they did, but they're kind of hard to get into, because they just get destroyed so easily. The Supreme Hunters also started using his spikes, which do a lot of damage. The thing is, my armor upgrades actually activate as soon as I get inside a tank. Although frankly, it's not making that much of a difference. The thing that is me actually moving, you know? Seems like a smart idea, to move and shoot. So after using quite a few tankers to whittle him down, he was left with a sliver of health for way too long. I didn't even realize that he could block your flip kicks. Then he's all knocking me around, I lose him for some reason, But I got him in the end, saved our sister, took her back to Ragland, and then he gave us this suggestive looking map. And apparently that was given to him by a very mysterious figure, whose silhouette I don't recognize at all. He tells us to go undercover as a helicopter pilot, but unfortunately when I get there, I happen to not have a military disguise ready. So something that should take about 2 seconds takes about 5 minutes, and the helicopter's even half damaged at the end of it. So not long after that I get shot out of the sky by a tank. And then after that, when I try and pick these guys up, because you know, I'm undercover and everything, I can't because the fucking thing's bugged. So then I restart the checkpoint and it spawns me on top of some cars which just explode in my face. I'm already down to half health, so I restart the checkpoint and die anyway. But finally, I picked these fuckers up. Also, this didn't cause me to fail, but as one of the next batches of soldiers got on my helicopter, a tendril threw a car at them and killed a bunch of them. I mean, that could have hit me, so close call, right? No, because I just get shot out the sky without any warning, but why? What an absolute endeavour it was to get here. And we did all that just to walk in and get uncovered immediately because of this new gas they made. Which is actually kind of a problem, by the way. I almost died like immediately the first time I encounter it. I managed to heal myself all the way back up though, probably because the soldiers do stuff like this. We get introduced to the super soldiers, which can honestly be beaten pretty handily because of their tendency to do counterable attacks. If you miss the counter, you could take quite a bit of damage though. They can apparently also be pretty slippery when they want to be. After that, I try and do an infected side quest, which means I have to consume the quest giver. Unfortunately, it gets killed before I can get to it, which is not the first time it's happened. So let's just say, at this point, I was a little I was a little upset about that. And in my quiet rage, I discovered something truly magical. You can hijack helicopters without Whipfist. It is a damn good thing I figured that out too. Otherwise this last half of the game would have been so much harder. And I never would have known just how satisfying it is to hijack a helicopter by jumping onto it. So in the next main mission I have to destroy some gas blowers, which does not seem like the correct name for that. And just look at how much health I'm losing just by standing around these things. The gas, plus the soldiers, plus the super soldiers being around, all messing me up, just takes off your health just like that. I have to take quite a few healing breaks between destroying these things, which really slows everything down. And these super soldiers chasing me around everywhere certainly isn't helping, especially not with the crazy things that they're doing. This mission ended up being pretty chaotic, especially when I flip kicked this helicopter, went to flip kick it again, accidentally hit a soldier, but that didn't matter because a hunter threw a car at it and destroyed it anyway. This is exactly why I love this game, just all these things going off all the time and just these crazy things that can happen. And I'll tell you what, if I wasn't doing this challenge, I would have just airbladed through the helicopter and that situation wouldn't have happened at all. I also wouldn't be doing sick jumps like this. And usually by this point in the game, I'd just be using my Devastators to take care of bases because I'm just so bored of them. Especially since I restarted the game from the beginning and did most of them all again. But then we wouldn't have gotten great clips like these.
Another step and you're dead. I'll blow your fucking head off! Freeze! I will shoot you! You want a piece of me, bro? Alt or I will kill you! I'll posterize you right now, All-Star! Now or I will fire!
Okay, that's enough. Let's get to the good shit. So now we start the long process of dealing with Elizabeth Green. We start by moving the gas over to where we can pump it into the ground because that's where she is, I guess. And I have to turn the damn thing around because the pathing gets messed up. Who is driving this thing? What are you doing? Oh my Christ, that's the just complete wrong direction. Yes, turn around. Okay. So when we get there, we have to protect it while it's doing its thing. And this is another part of the game that I usually have trouble with, except this time, you're supposed to have your powers. And I obviously don't. So things start getting pretty messy for me until I realize something. There's a fucking tank here. I've played this game so many times and I never noticed this. I mean, most of them were like 5-10 years ago when I was younger, but still. And if you use the tank, it's super easy for some reason. I killed all the hunters super quickly, and most of them came for me instead of the thing I'm trying to protect. Only like 1 or 2 went for it. And just look who's stuck in the wall again. You stupid bitch. But even when these idiots aren't stuck in walls, they can be dealt with pretty easily by just reversing. But okay, even though I talked a big game, when the tentacles start getting introduced, that's when things get hard. I managed to scrape by with the tiniest amount of HP left on my tank. And this is pretty much the last time the tentacles matter, so I really don't know how long it would take to beat these things without a tank or helicopter. But enough preamble, Elizabeth Green is here, and this isn't the final boss even though it feels like it is. It's certainly the most epic part of the game. It's also pretty difficult because you have to destroy the 3 tentacles around her represented by those health bars before you can actually do damage to her. And in this first phase, that is an absolute nightmare. Flip kicking and throwing big objects, which are the only things I can do, only shave off 1 bar each. And if you get close, you start taking big damage, and if you throw things, it can get knocked out of your hand, and there's just not a lot of shit around, for some reason. So let's skip the tedium of me scouring Times Square, and looking for things to throw, and all the healing breaks in between, and skip to the part where I get her down. And just look at this damage. It's pitiful. And that's not even mentioning all the hunters that are on my ass because I can't kill them quickly enough for me to be able to heal. So I'm in there risking my life for basically nothing. But here's the thing. After that first time you take it down, the tanks and helicopters show up, and there's a checkpoint. So not only can I start doing some actual damage, I don't have to worry about going back to the beginning and doing the most tedious part of the fight again. And just look at how much damage I'm doing in this tank. The difference is huge. And again, I'm glad I didn't do a challenge where I can only use basic melee. So then I get her down, and I start using my big brain, and I'm like, I should get in a helicopter so I can do big damage while she's down. But I just can't seem to be able to get on one of these helicopters. I can't do it for some reason. So I suck it up and just start throwing hands, and just look at that damage. Just look at that. Look at that huge damage. She should be about halfway down by now, by the way. So I burn through another one of the tanks, and I actually go and do it. I do a jumping hijack onto a helicopter, and then I just lose it pretty much immediately. So I burn through yet another tank, and have to suck it up again, and just throw some more hands. At least the army are pitching in, but I don't have my buffs, so they're doing way less than I would be doing if I was in one of those tanks. So you're probably wondering why I'm not in one. Well, the animation to hijack it takes quite a while, so I don't want to get into one while she's already downed, because I'll be wasting time. Although in retrospect it might have been a good idea, because of just how little damage I was doing anyway. I wasn't in one before that because they basically get disintegrated pretty quickly, mainly by all the rocks Elizabeth throws at you, but sometimes the green projectiles too. But then finally, I've got all of the shields down, and then I hijack a helicopter at just the right time to get the maximum amount of damage in, and I just melt her health bar. By the way, her tentacle shields get more health each time she gets downed, so once we get to the final stretch, I have to start employing some of the most skillful maneuvers. Using this tricky up and down strat, I managed to finally beat Elizabeth Green. Now that was a fucking ordeal. Actually, that's not true. I love that boss fight. That was a lot of fun. But the game's not over. We still got a lot of trials and tribulations to go through, including parking on this thing and almost not being able to get back in before it falls off. You may notice that I start firing the missiles in a panic, but it all turns out okay. We have a mission to destroy these filters and it's just an absolute mess. I barely manage to get into a tank, and even when I do, there's just like 1,000 things around. The game is really expecting you to have all your upgrades and all your Devastators and all that, and I do have some upgrades, but I don't have the ones that are actually doing damage. So yes, I died quite a few times here, and no, I didn't die during the Elizabeth Green fight. I just had to take a shit ton of healing breaks. This challenge isn't so much challenging as it is time consuming. Except for, you know, right now in this mission where it is really challenging because I can't get past all the gas and all the super soldiers and all this crap. But somehow I managed to use a tank and dodge all the damage and get 6 of the fucking things down. But then I have to try and run away and heal, and I die. But wait a minute, there's a checkpoint. Yeah, it turns out there's a checkpoint every 2 filters you destroy, so this actually isn't that hard. In fact, the checkpoints are pretty generous throughout this entire game. So Crossboss reveals himself as the suggestive stranger and tells us to destroy some helicopters. You have to destroy them before they get off the island, so I was actually kind of worried about this, but you can destroy them in one flip kick, except when you can't. At least the soldiers are giving me a helping hand. Unfortunately though, since I'm having some trouble hijacking helicopters, because of course it's really not that easy when you're just jumping for it, especially when it's, you know, flying away, I actually managed to let one escape. Thankfully when I restart the checkpoint, I managed to find one that's hovering pretty low to the ground, and not really moving. I actually ended up losing that one pretty quickly, but that doesn't matter, because later on, with the last 2 helicopters, I performed perhaps the sickest thing I've ever done in this game. I hijack one helicopter, it gets destroyed, I jump out, nearly dead, and I jump straight to the other helicopter and hijack it, completing the mission. I'm so happy about that we can skip over this part where it takes me like 10 minutes to consume this affected quest giver, and instead bury that frustration and get to the final stretch of the game. We're at the second to last mission, and we have to follow and consume Taggart. Who's Taggart? Don't worry, I don't know either. And surprise surprise, the most frustrating part of the game when you have your powers is also the most frustrating part of the game when you don't have your powers. And you know, takes about 2 or 3 times as long. You see, you follow Taggart's tank, and then eventually he stops around a group of 4 other tanks, and then you have to destroy them all to proceed, and you do that 3 times. And I can't hijack a tank because every time I do, I get knocked off, so I have to make use of the rocket launcher, which I generally have in this playthrough. And you can't even think about getting close to this mission, because if you do, Taggart's tank just takes off half your health. But we will skip most of the, you know, back and forth, getting a rocket launcher, having to heal a bunch of damage, and instead get straight to the humorous part, where I can just sit on Taggart's tank to quote unquote follow him. And look at this super soldier trying to catch up. Of course it's all fun and games until I start dying, more than once. And guess what? For some reason, nobody actually thought to put a checkpoint for when you actually get to the tanks. You know, the part after the super thrilling chase? What is with this game and its shitty chase sequences? So anyway, after prodding around for like ages, getting back to where I was and finding someone who actually had a rocket launcher, well then I had to repeat the process because of course they only give you 6 missiles even when you're fully upgraded. But I finally do it. I destroy all the tanks, I consume Taggart, who is apparently the final piece of the puzzle? Okay. We're finally back at the flash forward, you know, the tutorial, remember that? We bamboozle Randall, Cross bamboozles us, And then he turns into the Supreme Hunter we fought earlier, because apparently that was him, and he's the final boss. And it ends up being super easy. We just throw a couple of things at him, he falls over, we jump on his back and just start throwing hands. We get him to about a third of his health and then, oh shit. We fucking lose and the nuke blows up and kills everyone. Oh yeah, there's a nuke by the way. And because nothing ever comes easy, the second time is way harder than the first. I'm throwing shit at him like last time, but he's just not going down. It must have something to do whether he's explosive or not and whether he's doing his Devastator or not. Now, since this is taking place on an air carrier, there are no tanks, but there are helicopters. So making use of them, I get him back down to a third of health. And guess what, when that happens, that's when the timer starts, and just like last time, when it does, my health's super low, so I have to waste time healing. I absolutely scrape by on the very few soldiers that are still left after they started evacuating. Which, by the way, is a very smart way to tie this story into the escalation of difficulty. But finally, after throwing like 1,000 things at this guy, he dies. We throw the nuke in the ocean, and then we emerge on the shore, having beaten Prototype with no powers. And also no Devastators. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing this challenge for yourself. The most fun parts about it were the things I figured out, which you don't need to do because I've already figured them out for you. Like, you know, jumping, helicopter hijack, and... Is that it? Anyway, if you were going to do something like this, I would recommend doing it just excluding Whipfist, the Blade, and Devastators, because those things are OP. Everything else is kind of like, just saves you time. Like, do you really want to be beating bosses by just running and picking up things to throw at it? Or do you want to like go in with the claws or the Hammerfist or Musclemass? Which, by the way, it was super infuriating playing with Musclemass after the fact, because I was like, oh my god, I'm doing so much more damage with just everything I was doing when Musclemass is turned on. And then obviously there's the armor and shield, which just stop you getting so much damage and having to heal so much. Oh, it's just, everything's just so slow. I imagine a no upgrades playthrough would be a more straight up challenging challenge, whereas a fists only playthrough would be not only challenging, but also insanely slow and horrible. But maybe I will do those challenges sometime, or maybe someone else will. I really haven't seen any Prototype challenge runs before, anywhere. Honestly though, this video was so much work, I didn't realize how much work goes into one of these videos. Granted, it might be because I can't fucking speak and I have to record most lines like 5 times. But if you've gotten to this point in the video and you're still listening, can I have some engagement, please? All it'll really take is like 5 to 10 people I've watched all the way to this point for me to feel like it's worth making another one. So like, share, bell, notification, whatever the fuck, and I'll make some more.